Hey everyone, special edition of the blog this week as we're going video. So apologies that you'll have to see my face for this edition. But I have a very special guest that I'm super excited to talk to Olivia MacDonell here today. She was a practitioner for 6 years, which led her to starting Tap Integration, which if you've been a subscriber for the blog, you're probably familiar with as I share updates about the company every so often. So we're going to dive in, talk integration, psychedelics, and wherever else the conversation takes us. So, Olivia, where does this call find you today?
I'm in Austin, Texas, where I live, one of the best cities in the country.
Yeah, my former home. I do miss Austin, but I like being on the beach better. So here I am in Mexico. Cool. So uh, let's. I want to start with kind of big picture, or actually, maybe do you want to just do a quick like kind of summary of Tap integration? Anything that I missed in the intro?
Yeah, so I know I've been a practitioner, medicine practitioner for over 6 years. And back then, there were really limited resources for integration. I had to navigate my own sort of psychedelic awakening on my own and figure out how to integrate these huge changes and insights that were coming into my life and recognize the need for integration very early on in my journey. And since then, in my practice, have been developing a program that really assists and helps people to navigate their path forward after a psychedelic experience. With the emergence of AI, realized that we could um, really grow this integration program protocol and reach more people with it, offer more help and assistance, not only to the people going through the experience, but also to facilitators and practitioners.
It's awesome. Yeah, it's one of the reasons I wanted to be involved with TAP is as I went deeper into this world, I just heard countless like horror stories of, I had this like super harrowing experience, or even the inverse. I had like a really beautiful experience, and then afterward there was just like nothing, like no follow-up, no communication, whether it was from a retreat center or the facilitator, or sometimes just like a one-page email, like, avoid these things, like, but nothing. You've just downloaded so many like life-altering lessons and insights, and you're left to be kind of like autodidactic and go figure it out. So yeah, it's a mission I firmly stand behind. Let's start big picture. How would you explain integration simply to someone who's never worked with a coach or a guide before?
I love this question. I have a whole array of metaphors depending on who I'm talking to, but a really quick tagline is that um, integration is to psychedelics what physical therapy is to major surgery. So you can go and get a hip surgery, let's say, but if you don't do the physical therapy afterwards, and you're going to have more limited mobility, maybe more pain, you're still going to have that new hip, but it might not be adjusted to your body
Mm-hmm.
like it needs to. So when we think about integration, we're thinking about the merging of two things, right? The old operating system with a new operating system or new information that requires an expansion. And so the integration part is connecting the old with the new. We don't become a totally new person, but that awareness creates an expansion, which ultimately creates changes within us. And we need to know how to navigate within that change and that expansion. Another way of looking at it is, let's say you go on a really big adventure, you're gold mining and you find this treasure and you put it in your backpack and you go home with it, and you just end up leaving the treasure in the backpack. So it doesn't do a lot of good there unless you actually open the backpack, you take it out, you unpack it, you understand what it means and what value it holds and how to use that in your life.
Yeah, that's awesome. If someone just came back from their first, big psychedelic experience, like what's the very first thing you'd recommend that they do?
So the very first thing that I would recommend that they do is create one simple practice that can keep them grounded into that experience that they had. My personal favorite tool that I give each person that I work with is a really simple form of gratitude. We'll go into this a little bit later, but the whole mission of TAP integration is to simplify integration, to make it easier to understand, make the tools more accessible. And we segment integration into 4 categories: mind, body, heart, and spirit, which makes sense because let's say we go and we have this like big, expansive sort of brain surgery type experience with psychedelics. Well, we need to start to integrate that into each element of our being. So mind, body, heart. Um, and so gratitude is one of those integration tools that actually helps you integrate all of those at once. So it changes the way that you're thinking, the state that you're in. It changes your nervous system, your physiological state, because it helps you to kind of relax into this place of sort of acceptance for whatever is happening. And it gets you into a place of gratitude, which is this really powerful emotion that can open your heart as well. And then when you have your mind, body, and heart all coming online, it helps you feel more connected to the universe, to others. And so it's a really powerful, super easy practice that you can do every single day, very low effort. Yes, I'll pause there.
Yeah, no, it's, and for those that would dismiss that any of this is woo woo, I think it was Huberman last Thanksgiving did like a podcast on the science of gratitude, and in like, no uncertain terms, kind of broke down how it actually does all of the things that you just articulated. Like it actually does change neurons in the brain. It changes how we feel. So it isn't just something, you know, you know, cursory to do. It actually is like a super meaningful practice. I like that. Mind, body, spirit. What were the 4?
Mind, body, heart, and spirit.
Love it. Love it.
And spirit is something that we kind of introduce later on because it's important that we are relatable to everybody and accessible to everyone. So if somebody is not spiritual or they don't think they have a spiritual path, let's just start by focusing on changing the mind or upgrading the mind, the body, the heart, and then see how you feel, see how more connected you feel. I also want to mention the critical social reward learning period, which is that period of neuroplasticity that happens after you take psychedelics. Every different type of psychedelics has a different length of time of this critical social reward learning period. And that basically what that means is that new neural pathways are being formed. A very common metaphor that you hear a lot is the fresh snow being put on the deep grooves of our neural pathways so that we can start to form new ones. I also like to explain the mind as a hard drive. If we have spent a lot of time having experiences, trauma, things that have impacted our life, our hard drive starts to fill up with space until pretty soon, a lot of people in their late 30s, 40s will just hit a wall where they have no more space to take in new information and they need to download or process some of that old information to free up space. Psychedelics are so powerful in that they help us to free up a bunch of gigabyte space, right? Because we're able to process, and that comes in different ways. It comes through emotional releasing, backed up emotions. Emotions are energy in motion. And so when we don't allow ourselves to process emotions, we have a bunch of stuck energy inside of us that creates blocks, and that can start to fill up our hard drive as well. Also, compartmentalizing things that have happened in our life. So by like something happens, we're like, oh, I'm not going to think about that right now, or I don't have time to deal with that. And we just start putting them into all of these little boxes. Well, those boxes are going to take up a bunch of space. It's like all the cookies in your computer that start to fill up space. So psychedelics come in and they help us to open all of those compartments, open all the cupboards, and then we start to look at those, and then they start to move through as they need to, as well as the emotions. So following the journey, we have a bunch more space freed up in our mind. Our mind is also more malleable, so it can start to take in new information. We want to take advantage of that period that happens after the journey by creating new rituals and practices that are going to keep us in this balanced, integrated state. So gratitude is really helpful for that because you're rewiring your default mode network. If you're the type of person that is always seeing what's wrong with a situation, or you wake up and your mind's going off like all the things that you have to do, all the things that are not okay in your life, practicing gratitude in that period is going to be the maximum exercise or effort that you can make to rewire you out of that default mode network. So you then become the person who sees the cup half empty as the person who sees the cup half full. So that's with the gratitude. And then I can go into, practices for each of those categories that is going to be very helpful as well.
Yeah, yeah. Let's do that. I think the fresh snow analogy. I think it was Pollen that first articulated that in How to Change Your Mind, and it's the best way to describe what psychedelics do. In terms of like on a physiological level to someone who has just no idea, and their association with psychedelics are like drugs that they did one time in college or something like that. So yeah, do you want to dive in to those now?
Yes. So we'll start with the mind because that is how I started. But the thing about integration is personalized, curated integration is the number one rule. There is no such thing as one size fits all. And so it's really important that you find which segment you need to start with, which one is the most resonant for you, which pathway is going to be the easiest for you to start and continue on. So for me, I started with the mind. I'm a very cognitive person. So I started by taking in new information. When I went through my psychedelic journey, I had to relearn how to become a better person. I had to learn how to become a good person. I had really learned how to become, I was I did sales growing up, and you just start learning how to be dishonest in little ways, dishonest so that you can get your needs met, but it still is creating this sort of, negative effect. So, relearning how to add more love into my life. So I would listen to podcasts, I would read books, I would do all the things so that I could teach myself the value of virtues and why virtues were so important to me becoming the person I wanted to be to live the life that I wanted to live. So whatever your intention is going into that journey, really like tune into that. And then there are so many resources. And that's one thing that Tap Integration does is we have a whole library of resources depending on what it is that you're working on that you can then dive into and really take advantage of that neuroplastic state when your mind is like, feed me, give me more. And not everybody is feeling that right after. Some people need some time to process and go through that experience, and we'll shift into the body segment. So that might be a good place for you if that's you.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's other, there's powerful cognitive frameworks that are going to really assist you in rewiring your default mode network. There's practices of meditation. There's practices of visualization. And all of these are going to really help to rewire. Okay, so we have a whole list of these mental frameworks, but just so that you understand, this is just primary working with the cognitive, with our mind to start to get it to be our friend. Within this category, you have parts integration. There's a lot of different types of parts integration. There's IFS, internal family systems. You have Carl Jungian shadow work, where you start to really see different parts of you. Maybe that I have a part when I wake up in the morning, sometimes depending on how regulated or dysregulated I am, that I call my little fire ant energy, where it's like, you can imagine this little like fire ant with his like boxing gloves on, just like, okay, who am I going to get today? And I'm like, oh, okay. That used to be very problematic in my life. And so part of my mental integration has been working with that part of me with compassion.
Mm.
So talking to that part, as I say that, this big wasp comes. He's like, are you talking about me?
Drew them in.
Yeah. So having, compassionate inquiry, new ways of talking to ourselves so that we can start to integrate the parts that we don't like, that that make us uncomfortable, that are hard to work with. So that's going to be mind. And then shifting into the body. And for some people, this is the most important place to start. So, if you have a dysregulated nervous system, if you run really high in anxiety, if you have a lot of high cortisol, lots of stress in your life, you're going to want to start with a nervous system regulation practice even before the journey, but especially after, when you're able to really get calm. This can also be hard to do if your mind is really busy. So wherever you are, take BJ Fogg talks about tiny habits. Take that one small step in that direction that you could do on a daily basis. 5 minutes of breath work.
Mm.
YouTube has this guy, Breathe with Sandy. He has 5 minute videos, he has 10 minute videos, he has 20 minute videos. That guy has literally changed my life.
Right.
My nervous system has reached a new baseline that it has never known before. So it's interesting because I'm still integrating all of these things too. I'm teaching as I go.
Yeah.
But regulating my nervous system has been the biggest change factor in my life. Everything is different. I'm able to be more present with people. And I started by doing his breathwork videos every morning while I'm still in bed before I get up. I'll turn on a 5 minute video, I'll lay there, and he guides you through it with music. And it's just a beautiful way to wake up. So you can find a way that works for you. And then there's many other ones. You have like vagal toning, you have exercise. If you're really busy up here, you might need to just go get really active. You might need to jump on your bike. You might need to go for a run and let it out and get connected to your body in that way. And that will start to change over time as you get more regulated.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir. That one landed for me on a lot of, yeah. Anytime I've been in a period of like heightened anxiety, like a strenuous physical regimen is the cure, 100%. And I've noticed that post psychedelic experiences, like my relationship to the gym, embodiment, however you want to kind of capture it, like it it only increases my desire to stay healthy and strong and push my body in ways. So yeah, that particular kind of tranche of this integration framework resonates with me. All right, what's next then? Heart.
Well, and then I'll just add too, there is nutrition, gut health, so I just watched this TED Talks about this Dr. Chris Palmer. He was talking about how he believes that most mental illness is tied to metabolic health. And so much of what we think is bipolar depression can really be tied to our gut. So don't underestimate the ability of changing your nutrition in very small ways to start to impact your overall system as well. So that's an important piece. There's also sound baths. So find out what you are. Are you a more audible learner? Are you kinesthetic? Are you visual? Are you audio digital? Each one of those is going to have the best practices for them, depending on what you are, because that's how you take in information. So optimize for your unique system. That would be my number one recommendation.
Yeah.
Third category is heart. Heart is a tough one for some people to get to because most people have been building up wall over wall over wall over wall over wall to protect them. We have this, it's our most important vital organ. It gives us life. It helps us to connect. And so we spend a lot of effort and time trying to protect it. We also have blockages in it, that scar tissue that's been created when we've lost someone. Andrew, I know that you've lost a couple people that were really dear to you, and the pain, the suffering of that is overwhelming, that we're like, I can't feel that. So it's very natural to want to close and protect. The whole process of heart integration is going to be the process of going in there and kind of opening up the scar tissue, the wounds. One thing that I teach in my integration practice is about the beauty of a broken heart. When you think about a broken heart, we allow our heart to break open. It's actually breaking open all of that scar tissue, and it gives us that opportunity to really feel. So one thing that psychedelics do is that they increase our bandwidth to feel. They increase our bandwidth of emotions. So if you can imagine, before, the pendulum is going like this, from like grief, sadness, anger, shame over here to like, happiness, joy, peace over here. after the journey, we become more sensitive. We're able to feel more. So, what I encourage is for you to turn the volume up on anything that comes. So, we're opening the valve over here and we're opening the valve over here so that the emotions can then have a way to run their current all the way through. And that means if you have sadness coming up, give yourself full permission to feel it. Put on some music that can help you to emote, to really like go into that, sit with yourself, hold that experience within yourself. If you're feeling joy, put on some music that you can dance. And joy is actually a lot scarier to feel than sadness or these more negative emotions that we're used to feeling, because it feels so good that we immediately get afraid of it stopping. So we'll try to dampen our ability or capacity to feel joy. So that is really one that I would love for you to really try to practice turning the volume up. Dance, move, smile, laugh, really let yourself feel that. Let that become your new state, your new baseline. So the heart integration is all around emotions. It's also around relationships, communication. So we can change every pattern in our life by changing the way we communicate with ourselves and the way that we communicate with others. Relationships are one of the most important aspects of living a healthy, balanced life. They measured happiness, that happiness is directly correlated to the health and quality of your relationships. So that can come as we start to regulate ourselves, our nervous systems. Guess what? We're easier to be around. It's easier to have connection when we're balanced. It's also easier when we know ourselves. And that comes through knowing ourselves through the mind integration.
Wow. Yeah. That was awesome. I have two thoughts. Actually, one tying it back to the nourishment piece about diet. I've spoken to multiple people who, whether it was on ayahuasca or, during a potent psychedelic experience, at some point in the journey, like the medicine told them, you need to eat more of this or less of this. And who knows, like perhaps they were actually like deficient in vitamin D, and the medicine told them to eat that. So there is absolutely a correlation between what we eat, and powerful psychedelics. I've certainly, it's changed my diet unequivocally to be far more just healthy. I'm not plant based, but more vegetable, more fruit. And also just like taking time to like honor and gratitude, like when I do eat meat before I enjoy it. I think practices I never even thought about. It's like with before I started down this path. And in terms of the heart, you kind of alluded to something that I think doesn't get enough airtime in terms of grieving. One of the things that happens, and I'm like 100% guilty of this, is when you are grieving someone. When you do allow yourself, or just like a spontaneous organic moment of joy enters your life, like it's met with this quick desire to suppress it. Like, wait, no, that's not me. Like, I don't get to be that happy. I don't get to be that joyful, blissful. Like, and that can become like a very almost like chronic behavior that I've noticed in myself, and I've tried to work on, where it's like, no, I can, like, I can smile, I can dance, I can do things that bring me joy. And I think you're right. It's harder to be in a state of bliss and joy. And I think that's probably even exacerbated for certain people that have been through certain things, but maybe even just as like a general rule, yeah, joy is a lot harder than sadness. And I think that's actually sounds counterintuitive, but it's been incredibly true in my life. Yeah, that was interesting. And then, so next up is spirit. This is the hard one you mentioned.
Well, and I'll just add on to that, which is like, in order to get to the full expression of ecstatic joy, we have to get just as comfortable with grief and allowing the grief to move through. And humans are really terrible at grieving. We don't know how to grieve. It's really hard. And I know for me, that's the one gift ayahuasca really gave me, was allowing me to fully grieve the death of my mom. Whereas before, I would run from sadness. I had to, like, I really pushed it away as that not being me. And so that allowed me to, like, really release that in a huge way. And so whatever it is that you're avoiding in terms of feeling and emotions, seeing if you can turn the volume up just a little bit and allowing that emotion to move through you. Fourth, we have spirit. So my definition of spirit is very simple. It's a matter of being in harmony and out of harmony. You can also look at that as being in tune or out of tune, in alignment, out of alignment. So when our mind, body, heart all come online and they're starting to work together and we're feeling connected to all of them and we're feeling open, well, we start to come into resonance, into harmony, because we're moving as a unit. So when you think about a guitar has to be tuned every single day or every time you play it, at least, right? So anytime you pick up a guitar, it's going to need a little bit of tuning. Well, we as vibrational beings, as humans, because there's vibration all over the universe. The universe is made up of sounds, frequencies, vibrations. Um, we just like that have to tune our instruments, our frequency, our vibration, and you can start to notice when you're in harmony and when you're out of harmony. When you're out of harmony is when that little fire ant with his boxing gloves comes out and wants to start, at least for me, that's my telltale sign. Or you're just maybe like you have a little less peace within yourself, you're in conflict with other people, things aren't really going well. So if you can kind of imagine what's happening energetically, it's like playing a really discordant sound. When you hear that sound, people are like, like when a speaker screeches.
Mm.
We kind of become that. Like when you walk into a room and you're all like dysregulated and energetically off, people can feel it and they don't really know what's going on. Most people don't have an awareness of that, but they just know that there's this sort of like repulsion effect. And so it's our responsibility as humans to make sure that we're tuning daily, because we're not only affecting our lives, we affect everybody around us. I was listening to this neuroscientist who said the worst thing that can happen to your nervous system is another person. And the best thing that can happen to your nervous system is another person.
Yeah.
Because science shows that we physiologically affect ourselves. And so if you imagine like the closer we get to spirituality is the harmony that we're in, the frequency. So we can actually connect to the universe and spirit by being at a certain frequency. So David Hawkins talks about the different frequencies, right? So shame is at the very, very bottom. Peace is at the very, very top. And when you think about peace, you're feeling peaceful, you're feeling in harmony. That frequency is what connects you to spirit, to nature, to the universe, to everything else. Shame keeps you in this place of contraction, where you're hiding, where you're withdrawing, where you're repulsing other people. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Quick, actually, it's kind of a non sequitur, but how did you end up, like, what catalyzed your going down this path of psychedelics? Like, how did they come into your life?
That's a good question. One that has a very long backstory, but for those who are just tuning in for the first time to some of the stuff that I talk about, I was born and raised in the Children of God. It's an international cult, notoriously known as a religious sex cult. To the people within the group, it was a missionary organization built around Jesus and love and community and harmony. And so that was the light and the shadow and the reality of what it was, right? So it was actually both of those things. And it wasn't until I integrated the understanding of paradox and how important that is that I was able to hold both of those truths in my hand at once, that I could start to accept and understand myself. Because the truth is I came from both of that. So I grew up in communes all over the world. I've lived with hundreds and hundreds of people. So I've been fascinated by psychology, by people since I was a child, was constantly recognizing patterns and similarities and differences in people, observing them. And I had so many people to observe. So it was a really awesome experience, a way for me to really understand the human psyche and personalities from a very young age. I experienced a lot of trauma So I had complex PTSD by the time I was like 25 to 29, and was on a really desperate mission to figure out how to heal myself. I had had a spiritual experience when I was 16. At 15, I ran away. I escaped the cult in Guatemala. I ran away and had some harrowing, life-threatening experiences. I was shot at a couple times, had sexual trauma. And after that, came back to the family to visit my mom. And somebody said, "Hey, Olivia, God told me to play you this song." So the person started playing this song for me, and I had the same experience as most people have when they take MDMA for the first time. My heart burst open. I was flooded with this feeling of unconditional love and peace and acceptance. And I knew in that moment that that was my life's purpose, that I was meant to be of service for the rest of my life, and that it was to help people to find that feeling. And so I thought that that was through Jesus and the cult. And so I rejoined, and that led to more years of trauma and confusion. And I finally left at 19, came to Austin, and about when I was like 28, 29, started listening to these podcasts with like Rick Doblin and people talking about psychedelics and how life-changing they were. And there was something about MDMA therapy that really stuck out to me, that really called to me. And I was like, I wonder if that could help. I had tried so many things. I tried cutting out alcohol. I tried, doing yoga and all this other stuff to try to figure out all of my dysfunction. But ultimately, MDMA therapy ended up changing my life. And well, it was the catalyst for healing, and integration is really what changed my life. Because if it wasn't for the teachings of Ram Dass and Michael Singer and these people who helped me to understand everything I went through, also the craziness that the ego goes through, which is what I will actually add to the spirit segment, is ego traps and pitfalls. Really important part of the spirit, because that's what's going to ultimately disconnect us from ourselves and others, is when our ego gets uh, Ram Dass calls it holy phony, where you start to see yourself as better than, separate from, high vibes only, where you are evolved, you're conscious now, and other people are not. So that's the advanced course, but that's definitely something that you want to be aware of and tune into. So MDMA therapy put me right back on that path that I was on when I was 16 years old, and I realized that that was the gift that I could give to other people.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I'm so glad I asked. That was powerful. I want to just end on one last question, because I would be remiss if I didn't get your thoughts on where you see the future. Obviously, psychedelics are becoming more and more mainstream. Where do you see integration practices headed in 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now?
That's a good question. I think in 2, 3, 5 years, we will have really learned how to bridge technology with integration to make our lives easier. I mean, I'll tell you, it's hard for me to self-start, and to do even 5 minutes of breathing on my own was just not going to happen.
Mm.
And if I didn't turn on YouTube and put that guided breathwork session on, I would not have been so consistent with it. And so I do think that as consciousness increases and there's more bridges, human bridges, between the technology world, AI, and the spiritual practices, we're going to be able to make integration practices easier. That's one of the main goals that TAP integration has. So I do think that's going to be one of the things we're going to see. And of course, that's, there's lots of counter arguments to how harmful and destructive it can be, and that is true. And so I think it's up to each of us to be as responsible in honing the integration between integration and technology. So I think that that's one thing. I think we're going to see a lot more communities, intentional communities open, and people learning how to work together in harmony, because ultimately that's what we need as humans. And community is a huge, huge part of integration, is being able to work together, build together, love together, teach each other. We can't have full self-awareness without other people. So internal self-awareness is only half of the full self-awareness, right? That's how well you know yourself.
Yeah.
External self-awareness is how well you know yourself through the impact you're having on other people. So you need people to complete what it means to know yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. That reminds me of a quote. It was like, I'm probably not going to say this verbatim, but it's like, love is the soul's recognition in another. Like, yeah, you need that interaction to help kind of codify all the lessons that you learn during a journey and through the integration process. So that was awesome. Really enjoyed this. I'll put, all the information on where to find TAP and you, when I send this out. But just yeah, every time we speak, I get re-enthused and excited that I'm a part of TAP, because I think it's awesome. And I think yeah, I'm a contrarian optimist for all of the reasons. Like, there's a lot of things to be pessimistic about. Go on social media, you'll be reminded of those things. But I don't know, when I go out and speak to people, like, a lot of people are waking up, they're having these experiences, they're trying to make these experiences, equate to like a better, more fulfilling, joyful life. And yeah, I think there's just so much to be optimistic about. So thank you.
Woohoo!
Thank you for
Yes,
your
my
time, Olivia. It was awesome.
pleasure.
All right. Bye.